So we want to look at paradigm, research paradigm. And when we say paradigm, it talks about the way we see things. Okay, it talks about our ideology. It talks about our philosophical stance. So we say that paradigm is the lens that we use to see. And we are all not using the same lens. We could have the same eye, but we are not using the same lens. And that is why at this level of the PhD, it should be able to help you to accommodate perspective. Hitherto, we didn't know this. So if someone is sharing a certain perspective, we do not actually appreciate that perspective being shared. All right. So it's very important that we understand this perspective as we deal with issues. So, and it helps us, once we understand perspective, we know that we cannot be, 100% correct. We could have a view that suggests something, but that cannot be wholly true, and that can also not be wholly false. So the idea of paradigm is to accommodate, to understand and accommodate perspectives, that we can all not think the same way. Okay, so if you look at this lens, you realize that these lenses are different. The shades are different. Okay, so we say a paradigm is a lens or way of thinking about the world. Okay, so how is knowledge acquired? Other people have different views. In fact, when we talk about this, how we even evolve as human beings, people think that we came from this Big Bang theory. Charles Darwin's, almighty blood bank. Okay, that Big Bang somewhere where we used to be in some small fossil, and the thing burst, and then we all evolved from that. That people that believe in that. Others also believe that we evolved from animals. Okay, like the apes. And let's have that perspective. And these are all perspectives we are sharing. Some people say the world is flat. Others say it is spherical. But those who say they're flat and the others say it's spherical, the fact of the matter is that you cannot be in the world and describe the world, isn't it? You cannot be on earth. You are inside it and you are describing it. You really need to go outside to be able to see whether it's spherical or flat, isn't it? So these guys who are all giving their perspective, they are still in, and they are using some sort of theories and other things, but that is fine. These are all perspectives. So as a PhD holder, when you're engaging people in conversation and all that, it's very important that you allow people to share their views, because that is perspective. So that is what this is meant to, just redefine you and realign you to how things happen, because the lens you have is different from what the person is seeing. And you need to understand that that's where the person is coming from. So that's this whole thing about this philosophy of science. And we will keep arguing. We will not finish today. There will be more arguments. So we have the realism or positivism. Another word for positivism is realism. So they are saying that, let's come here. We talked about ontology, okay? So beliefs about what? Reality. So ontology is beliefs about reality, because I'm going to talk about that. That's why I took you there. So positivist is a certain ontology within the quantitative paradigm. What do they hold? What do they believe? Now, these are realists. So say if somebody say, I'm a realist, like these are people who believe that truth is there. It is certain. Now, they are certain about reality, that knowledge is there and they can discover it. They can use some methods to discover it. And they believe that if God exists, I should know where he lives. God should be a human being. He should be able to marry. I mean, they don't believe in things that they cannot see. These are realists. So once people say that I'm realist, what they mean is that they believe that knowledge can be acquired through verification. So if you say that the thing is A, let's verify. These are the people who want to prove. These are people who want to critically analyze. These are the quantitative people. Okay, so that's their ontology. That's their belief or reality. Then we have the rationalists or the relativists, who believe that there is no single one truth that has to be discovered. There's no one single way to acquire knowledge. They believe in multiple perspectives of reality. They believe that knowledge can be co-constructed. In fact, what we call knowledge can be constructed by different perspectives. That knowledge is not in the boundary of relativism, of realism. It's not within realism where the thing is real. We have to know that the thing is there. We have to justify. They don't believe that. And these people have this kind of belief that you don't need to see God in person to believe that he exists. These are the people who say that common sense should tell you that if you are able to create a vehicle, then you are the creator. So the vehicle is the creation. So if we are the creation, then there might be a creator. These are the rationalists or the relativists. This is their perspective. And these are people who believe in the moons, they believe in the stars, they think that these celestial bodies talk to us. People who believe in dreams, okay? And they believe that God exists, they believe in the Holy Spirit and all that. But the realists and the positivists believe that, hey, they are atheists. They don't believe in these things. You have to prove that God exists. If you cannot prove that God exists, if there's no verification to know that he exists, then you have a problem. So these are the two schools of thought. And this is what is shaping our mindset as researchers, okay? Then there is also those who are the constructivism group. The constructivists, they are neither positivist, they are neither relativist. In fact, an example of a constructivist is the paradigm where we call is there's a name for it. Those who do the mixed method, okay, where they say whichever one works. I'll remember that paradigm. Okay, they combine and pragmatists. Okay, pragmatists. Pragmatists come from those constructivists. Constructivists. They come from that paradigm. They don't believe in just qualitative. They believe that the two have their own weaknesses, and that when we put them together, then we are able to mitigate the level of error that we are likely to have in the study. So pragmatics is one paradigm that takes quantitative, combines quantitative and then qualitative. So you see someone doing a big study and he will tell you that his philosophical stand or his ideology or his paradigm is what? Pragmatism. All right, and then different shades of them. That the rationalists have their own paradigm, their own research methods, and all that. We'll see it in just a jiffy. Then within each paradigm, there's also distinctive what epistemology or approaches. That's what it means by epistemology. There are different approaches, and we say epistemology determines the relationship between the researcher and the what? Research. The researcher and the research. Okay, that's what epistemology talks about. It talks about the approaches. So there's the ontology, there is the epistemology, there's the epistemology, and there are a number of them. Okay, that talks about what the paradigm that you are looking at, and these all shape you as a researcher in making decisions as to what the focus of the research will be. We say that the quantitative are the positivist, and it's based on the realist ontology. Research approach to knowledge is discovered from ethic. So we have the ethic and the emic. Ethic is an outsider. So in quantitative study, you come as an outsider. You are not an insider. But the emic is what? An insider, which is a qualitative study. And another name for qualitative researchers or those who use that paradigm, if somebody say I'm a naturalist, it means he is a qualitative person. Okay. In other words, he believes in the rationalist or relativism. Okay, he believes in that. And qualitative researchers do not believe that knowledge is fixed. They don't believe that. They believe that there are multiple views toward knowledge, multiple perspectives to knowledge. And in fact, knowledge can be co-constructed. And because they come from the emic point of an insider point of view, you see, the insider point of view deals with what? An inductive study. Inductive in a sense that we are using the data to build theory. We are using expert opinion to construct certain theory, to generate certain themes so that we can test later. That is what the emic insider's approach is like. That is the qualitative. Most people don't respect qualitative research, but I tell you that too, all theories started from what? Qualitative. And over time, when these things were, constructed as a theory, because it was a concept, a model, they tested it over time, used reliability testing, using validity tools to test, and then over time, when it became replicable at other areas, then this theory began to gain some sort of force. All this UTAC2 and other things that we are testing, they were all once upon a time from an inductive study and from an insider's perspective. And over period, it became a theory, and people begin to use it as we've done over the period. So quantitative researchers they deal with generalization of data and then deals with rigorous research. Sometimes it could be inferential, it could be experimental, it could be simulation. In fact, it could be quasi-experimental. For our study, it is non-experimental. We call it quasi-experimental. It is not, we are not sending, some sort of a placebo to the lab to look at things, okay? But it is a form of a pseudo-experimental study we are doing, a kind of a quasi-experimental study that is not involving human beings or animals, but then we are testing some sort of correlation, effect, and causality using data, okay, that we have collected from people. And then we have the simulation approach, which is also some form of simulation. Is just mimicking real life situation on a computer, and it has a predictive rate of about 99.9999. So when you simulate something, the tendency that you are going to make a mistake is very, very minimal. Then, so these are the types of quantitative research. When you come to the qualitative research, there's a number of them, okay? The simulation, it talks also about artificial environment within the relevant information. I've talked about it. It generates data. In fact, my PhD, I use simulation. I think that maybe I'll show you to you guys one of these days. The qualitative approach deals with what? It's more subjective, whilst the quantitative is what? More objective. And that's why the quantitative guys are positivists who believe that knowledge should be ascertained through objective means. If you say God exists, let's see where he lives. If you say 1 + 1 is 2, let's verify the first one and the second one. That's what they believe. But with the qualitative guys, they deal with perspective, they deal with attitude, they deal with opinions, they deal with behavior. That is what they believe. And in such situation, you realize that the insights and the impressions of the people are more relevant to the study. And such an approach researcher generate result either in a non-quantitative form, and it's not rigorous though, but it's also acceptable. Okay, so these are the difference between the quantitative and the qualitative study. Qualitative study is used to understand and then interpret human perspective, whilst quantitative used to generalize what population, look at what correlation, population attributes. Remember, one understands, the other one do comparison. One is less generalizable, the other one is, generalizable to the population. One deals with rich description because you are dealing with individuals and we want their perspective. And the other deals with numerical summary. So in your qualitative research, if we see that you are having frequencies, you are having mean, standard deviation, then you have deviated from the paradigm. Qualitative deals with depth and quantitative deals with what? Breadth, okay? And then qualitative deals with small sample size. I've talked about it. Qualitative, it deals with small sample size. Quantitative is large sample size. Now, qualitative use selection of procedures to establish trust in the data. The quantitative deals with what? Validity and reliability. So you realize that if I'm doing a qualitative study and then I get to chapter 3, and then I talk about reliability, it tells you that no, because we are not testing, doing Cronbach alpha testing, or we are not doing different types of tests of reliability. We are not using construct validity or phase validity, to test the data. We don't have any instrument that we are using. In qualitative study, the instrument we are using to collect the data is an interview guide. Okay, so we don't have any statistical means of establishing validity and reliability. So if you're doing qualitative study and then you talk about validity and reliability, it tells me as a supervisor that you don't understand what you're doing. And if you're doing a quantitative also study, then you talk about, okay, you don't talk about validity and reliability, then you didn't have any instrument. You didn't have any instrument, but the instrument is your questionnaire or secondary data that you're using, or secondary numeric data somewhere that you're using. You never talked about it. So these are the things that we look at when you are defending, just to know that you understand what you are doing. So we took it from the paradigm. Look at where we took it and drill it down to this level. And it goes to the extent of talking about even the sampling technique. Because see, quantitative study, let me see if it's here. Yeah. So quantitative study, let me come here because we've talked about it. Quantitative study deals with what? Probability sampling techniques. So probability sampling techniques are this. They are this random sampling, systematic, stratified, cluster, other sampling technique. And the non-probability sampling techniques are the convenience, judgmental, quota, snowballing. This deals with what? Non-probability deals with what? Qualitative. Probability deals with numbers, quantitative. So if I choose a quantitative or positivist paradigm, and I'm doing my methodology, after I have spoken about the paradigm, positivist, and that knowledge can be acquired through verification, then I do my research design. I should know that research design can be only quantitative. Either I do a descriptive, either I do as an explanatory or diagnostic research. And then when I come to population, I'm dealing with a larger population. The targeted population should be large so that I can take a sample that represents it, because I'm going to compare population parameters. I'm going to do some sort of correlation. I'm going to describe the population. Then I should also establish the fact that my sampling technique should be scientifically generated, because I'm dealing with probabilities. It should be the random sampling, systematic sampling, stratified, and these sampling techniques should inform what I'm doing. For instance, if I'm dealing with an environment where, let's take aspect, or maybe Cynthia's work. Cynthia is dealing with this, what do you call it? The pension fund. So pension fund, they have different regions. So in sampling, maybe Accra, there are more subscribers, right, than the northern region. So if Cynthia says that he's using simple random sampling, you know what will happen? You are putting all of them together. Now, there's a possibility that you might select more northern people to be part of the study than a Greater Accra. But Greater Accra is bigger than Northern region. So why not do it stratified, that you put them in strata, okay? Because you want the possibility that they all have the equal chance of being selected. If that is the case, then put them in a strata. In a strata, you can now use proportion to do the random sampling, because then you would know that, okay, 16 regions, if Greater Accra is having the largest one, then if you do the proportion, Greater Accra is going to have more, a quota to do the randomization from them, so that you pick theirs. For instance, so if the sample size is, let's say, 100, and the Greater Accra has a bigger distance, then you can apportion 40% for Greater Accra so that it is evenly distributed. So that's the idea, but you use random sampling where that factor is not in there, where the population is just green, and you think that there's no segmentation and all that. Systematic sampling also has its own use. We'll talk about these things into detail, and then the cluster sampling and the other sampling technique. If you come to the non-probability, we have the convenience sampling, the judgmental sampling, quota sampling, and snowballing. They are all non-probability. They are not scientifically based. You don't need any statistical tool to justify it. You only have to give a certain justification based on a researcher's own view. For instance, if you're doing convenience sampling, we will go to Paga Crocodile Pond. You want to interview someone, and they say there's an old man who lives beyond after the river somewhere, and you think that you don't want to go through the river. There are crocodiles in there. You don't trust them and all that. So there's another aged old man who is 90 years, but the one who lived after or beyond the river is around 106 years. So that guy has more experience than this one who lived before, the river. So what you decided to do was to, by convenience, you decided to choose the one who lives, in front, around where the river is, so that you will not cross it. That's convenience sampling. It's based on your own. And sometimes also convenience sampling can be, you do that because maybe you don't want to travel far. Maybe you think that you can have alternative. And that's what makes this more subjective. Then we have the judgmental sample, which is based on what your judgment or the purpose of the study. And that's what we call purposive sampling. I can tell you, if you look at articles today, very top articles, most of them have used purposive sampling for quantitative study, defined by the paradigm. And that is not just a mistake, it's a sin, because you cannot change the gender of a study. Because once you say that a quantitative study using purposive sampling, then you have faulted. In fact, that is a big error related to what the paradigm, because you started as a positivist, you use correlational study or you use explanatory study, and then you came to the population, and then you are being judgmental. You didn't use statistics to establish the sample. Then that becomes a problem. Okay. And then we have the quota sampling and the snowball. Snowball, you use other people to reach the other bigger ones. So this one is very, very important. And then just a quick one. We talked about the paradigm, the quantitative and the qualitative. Quantitative are more scientific. They are either quasi-experimental or experimental design. It's based on objectivity. It's able to look at phenomena objectively. Qualitative research occurs in natural environment, and reality is co-constructed, and it is core constructive paradigm, as I talked about it. And the focus of qualitative research is subjective in nature. The goal is uncover something in reality. Now, the fact of the matter is there's no one single paradigm that is acceptable. They all have the ontological, epistemological, and methodological differences. They all have. Now, no one is devoid of what errors. They all have their own errors. Regardless of each paradigm, there are limitations. And that's why, as a researcher, you try as much as possible to mitigate some of these limitations, and we see how we can proceed with the research. And then here we say that quantitative use, deductive study, qualitative use, inductive study. One is an insider, quantitative is an outsider ethic, qualitative is an insider emic. We have talked about that. Now, for qualitative research, look at something. The research includes focus groups, interviews, and observations, okay? To collect data for analysis, we use teams or we build models. The models is where we use the grounded theory. Teams is where the teams that emerge are then reported, okay, under the objectives or the research questions. So that's what qualitative guys do. And there are different methods relative to qualitative study. There are different approach. We have the phenomenology where we deal with what a phenomena. That is also a method. We have the grounded theory. I've talked about it. Phenomenology deals with a lived experience. And then we have the what? The ethnography, where I talked about anthropology, industrial anthropology, and all that ethnography. These are all within that band. Okay, so these are set approaches that you can use for your study. As a PhD guy, you need to appreciate these two perspectives. Even though you might be a positivist or a relativist, I decided to align with Karl Popper. Karl Popper, developed the theory of falsification. They said the guy was crazy, but I like him. He believes that any theory that can stand the test of time should be falsified. Okay, and I like the guy, but when I'm writing, the fact that I align, that doesn't mean I shouldn't study and understand qualitative research. Sometimes people think that I'm a qualitative guy because of how I'm able to take the subject and then, crash it. Some other people think that I'm quantitative because of the way I deal with quantitative study. So important that these perspectives should be looked at. People believe that they cannot be jack of all trade. But I tell you, they say jack of all trade, master of none. I say jack of all trade, master of all. You can be master of all. So you can get into phenomenology. This is knowledge that is there and you can study. And the quantitative part also deals with what most larger sample size that we talked about is deductive in nature, experimental or quasi-experimental. Then we talked about this. So finally, about ethics to research. Ethics is everything to research. And it is very important that ethics is looked at holistically. Now, you need to be very cautious about certain things. For example, if you're starting your study, you need from the school clearance for ethical approval, and you need to look at your research questions, your topic, and everything to grant you the ethical approval. If your school or your organization grants you the ethical approval, what it means is that you have the clearance and the school is saying that should you do the study and then encounter any challenges that leads to some legal issues, then the institution are going to take it up because you are a student. Once you don't have that letter or backing, it becomes an issue. I sit on the ethics committee as a chair, and these things come and then we look at it. They say they want data, so they have ethics clearance, and then the school has written the letter on the student's behalf, seeking that we should support that student. What it means is if they use the data for unintended purposes, you will take the school on. So what we are saying is that the subject of your research, the respondents, you should be able to make sure that they are not harmed. You should be able to explain the research to them to the extent that, if you think that they are not comfortable, you leave them. It is important that you explain the consequences of the research on them. It is important that you let them know that, you make them anonymous and that the outcome of the research will not affect them. These things are part of the ethical statement. And what we do as part of when you're even doing interview or you administered a self-administered questionnaire, you have to read loudly the ethical statement that this research is undertaken to do this. Let me give you a typical example. I think there is one example here. Maybe I can use that. There's one something here. You can look at it. Let me see. I just developed a questionnaire. Okay. So there's a study here. So there's it. So you're saying that the researcher is undertaking this project in partial completion of the criteria for a doctor of business administration. The study is an assessment of risks associated with public-private partnership project in Ghana. Respondents are informed that this study is strictly academic. These are part of the ethical statement, and that all information collected will be held in strict confidence and anonymity. Formal permission is required to administer this questionnaire. Then we are saying here that please select yes for consent or no if you do not consent to answer the questions. And the fact of the matter is that if you say no and you click yes, it terminates what? The research. Okay, then you submit, you are done. But if you say yes, then we give you the opportunity now to proceed with what? The research. And these things are built in. Now you talk about demography and all that. These things are built in research works that we do. So it is very important that these things are what appreciated. Okay. So these ethics are very, very important with research. It's an ethical issues, justification for the research, access to participant privacy. That's very important. At any point in time, the participant says that, hey, I'm not willing to continue on with the work, you have to stop it. In fact, in the middle of the research, they might say that, hey, it's okay, you have to stop it. That is so that they do not think that you coerce the person to kind of answer the question. And then you need the informed consent and also need to talk about potential harm and all that. So that brings us to the end of this discussion. I think we've done this part. And if you have any questions, do let me know so that we can take it out from there. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, so I appreciate